Today, we'll be discussing the biggest question for every AFC team going into the 2023 NFL season. But before we jump into it, I probably spent about an hour and a half to 2 hours researching and writing on each team, plus all the editing time and recording, which is about another 3 hours for each team. What I'm trying to say is that these two videos were a massive undertaking, and I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll return the favor to you by providing you with more in-depth NFL content. Outside of that, I'll be referencing DVOA and DR often in these two videos. DVOA stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average, and the number you see will represent how much better or worse the player is than the league average player at their position. So, for example, a 5% DVOA for a quarterback means that the quarterback was 5% better than the league average quarterback. DR stands for Defense Adjusted Yards Above Replacement and represents the yardage a player has gained or lost compared to a replacement level player at their same position. So, for example, if a quarterback has a DR of 1,000, they gained 1,000 yards over what a replacement level quarterback would have provided in that season. These stats are provided by FootballOutsiders.com, which also has a way more in-depth explanation if you care to look into it more, but that's sufficient for now. So let's get into each team's biggest questions heading into 2023, and some other interesting questions for each team. In 2021, the Bills suffered a devastating loss to the Chiefs in the AFC divisional round, losing 42-36 after they infamously allowed the Chiefs to tie the game with only 13 seconds left, and they never got a chance to touch the ball in overtime. This was now the second time they had lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs in the past 2 seasons, and they were getting tired of it. This was no longer an up-and-coming team that was close to their potential. The time to win the Super Bowl was now. So in 2022, the Bills, who already had an MVP-level quarterback, an elite wide receiver, and a defense that allowed the least points and yards, had the third most takeaways, and ranked number 1 in the league in pressure rate, added 8-time Pro Bowler and 2-time Super Bowl champion Von Miller to finally get them over the hump. They retained all of their star talent, except Mitch Trubisky, and signed one of the elite defensive talents in the league to add to an already dominant defense. They also added first-round cornerback Kaiir Elam to solidify the defensive backfield, and drafted running back James Cook to boost their rushing attack. With all of these moves, the Bills came into 2022 as heavy Super Bowl favorites, and were touted as the best team in football, especially after the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill away, and seemingly had little receiving talent outside of Travis Kelce. 2022 was the Bills' year, and after an extremely narrow victory over the Skylar Thompson-led Miami Dolphins in the wildcard round, they finally did it. They didn't lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs. Instead, they lost to the Bengals in the divisional round by 3 scores. So now, after 3 disappointing playoff exits, the question is posed. Can the Bills get over the hump and meet expectations? In the constant war of attrition faced by NFL teams, the Bills are no exception, and they've lost their defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier, lost linebacker Tremaine Edmunds, have both of their starting safeties coming off serious injuries, Von Miller's coming off an injury and is another year older, the division has gotten significantly better, and Stephon Diggs has created some drama about his relationship with the team in the offseason. Although Sean McDermott has had great success as the Bills head coach, this fan base and team ownership want a Super Bowl, and McDermott will find himself on the hot seat after the season if he can't deliver. He's made the risky move of taking over defensive play calling for the 2023 season, putting the blame squarely on himself if things go wrong. There's no doubt they have the talent, and they're led by one of the most elite talents at the quarterback position in Josh Allen. The Bills also had one of my favorite drafts this season, picking tight end Dalton Kincaid, guard Osiris Torrance, linebacker Dorian Williams, and wide receiver Justin Shorter. It may not necessarily be now or never for the team, but it is now or never for McDermott. And every year the goal gets more difficult as a team for the Bills, as the players get older and they lose coaches and they lose players. In 2023, they'll be hoping to take the next step and win their first Super Bowl. Here are some other questions for the Buffalo Bills in 2023. Can Tre'Davious White bounce back after a rough season in 2022 and an ACL tear in 2021? Who is the number 2 to Stephon Diggs? Can Gabe Davis finally live up to the hype and fulfill the number 2 role? What is Dawson Knox's role on this team after drafting Dalton Kincaid? Will Von Miller be able to play at an elite level after an injury and getting another year older? Can Greg Rousseau improve upon a good season and break out into the public discourse? Can Kaiir Elam improve upon a slow start to his career? Is the O-line finally improved? Is Josh Allen's injury fully healed? And is the running back room going to be enough? Trevor Lawrence was touted as a generational prospect. Some said he was the best since Luck, others said since Manning, some said since Elway. Regardless, he was considered to be one of the best prospects at the QB position seen in a long time. Following this logic, the Jaguars would pick Lawrence number 1 overall and pair him with pseudo head coach Urban Meyer. I say pseudo because although he was named head coach, he was very much not a real one. Meyer's tenure kicked off with immediate dysfunction after he hired Iowa strength coach Chris Doyle, who had left that team due to racism and bullying allegations. But it didn't stop there. Meyer told reporters that the Jaguars considered a player's vaccination status when making roster cuts, which regardless of your opinion on, is stupid to tell the media that you were considering it in making cuts. The team was fined for OTA violations, Meyer reportedly didn't even know who Aaron Donald was, and the last issue before the season started was Meyer politely demonstrating to Josh Lambo how to accurately kick a football by demonstrating on his leg. But the start of the season did not stop this behavior. Meyer got into heated arguments with players, called his coaches losers, benched players for non-existent injuries, and the final straw finally happened when, after losing 24-21 to the Bengals, Meyer didn't travel with the team and stayed in Ohio under the guise of seeing his grandkids. This turned out to be a lie, as Meyer was more likely looking to make some more kids rather than visiting any of them. This dysfunction resulted in a horrible team that went 2-11, but even worse, a year of non-development for a generational prospect. Lawrence had the 6th worst DVOA with a negative 19.5% and had a 59.6 PFF grade, which was 32nd of 37. But after a year of progress was told by a hilariously bad Urban Meyer tenure, Lawrence had an outstanding season in 2022. He had the 6th best DVOA with a 13.1% and had a 78.6 PFF passing grade, which ranked 11th. Some people declared that Lawrence has finally arrived, but the majority think that the ceiling has yet to be reached, and for good reason. Lawrence no doubt improved last season, but he was very inconsistent. He'd have some games where he could barely complete over 50% of his passes and wasn't able to string multiple great games together for longer than a couple games. For example, in a game to decide their playoff fate against the Titans, arguably the most important game in his NFL career up to that point, Lawrence had multiple shots to take the lead in the 4th quarter and failed to throw for even a single first down. Instead, the Jaguars won that game because their defense scored on a sacked fumble, creating a 4th quarter comeback win where the offense of the winning team failed to get a single first down in the 4th quarter. However, his inconsistency yet sheer talent is no better displayed than his first playoff appearance where he threw 4 interceptions in the first half against the Chargers, then led 5 straight scoring drives to complete a massive comeback victory. So here's the point. Lawrence clearly has tons of talent, and he's played up to that a good amount of the time. But if he wants to live up to his generational status, he'll need to cement himself in 2023 as more than just a great quarterback who's capable of great levels of play. He'll have to play well enough to convince people that he's an elite quarterback and that he's there to stay. If he can do so, the Jaguars will be a force to be reckoned with. Some other questions facing the Jaguars in 2023 are whether they improve their pass rush. Will their young linebackers improve? How will Calvin Ridley return after a year off? Can Evan Ingram capitalize on a good season? Can Falu Fatukasi rebound after his worst year in the NFL? Is their offensive line good enough to compete after losing Jawan Taylor? And will Kayvon Chason be able to show that he's worth a roster spot in the league, even after being kind of a bust as a first-round pick? After being traded to the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson signed a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract with an average salary of $46 million per year. This contract came after a full year of not playing any football in 2021, but the last we saw of him, he played really well in 2020 and looked like one of the league's up-and-coming stars. Lots of public discourse, legal filings, and an 11-game suspension later, Deshaun Watson stepped onto the football field for a regular season NFL game for the first time in 700 days. And how did it go? He went 12 for 22, 54.5% completion, for 131 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, and a 53.4 pass rating. Well, that's to be expected, I guess, considering he hasn't played in forever. How did he do after? He had a PFF grade of 55.3, which ranked him 35th of 39 qualifying quarterbacks. In his last 5 games, he had a 57% completion percentage, averaged 185 yards per game, had 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. In his time back, Watson had a DVOA of negative 16.6%, meaning that he was almost 17% worse than the league average replacement quarterback. And this pans out. When you look at his numbers compared to Jacoby Brissett's numbers, who I'd say is likely around the league average replacement quarterback, if not slightly better, it doesn't look good. As you can see, Brissett had a way higher completion percentage, had a better QBR, and had a way higher DVOA. He also had more touchdowns and more interceptions, but he played in more games, so obviously that's different. And Watson was able to get more yards per game. But there's the problem. The team got rid of Baker Mayfield, risked turning their fan base against them, risked creating problems in the locker room, dealt with a massive media storm and criticism, validated a man accused of doing horrific things to unconsenting victims, and gave him a massive, fully guaranteed deal, only to result in him stinking it up in his only appearances in a Browns uniform. This comes during the Super Bowl window for the Browns, after they significantly beefed up their defensive line to be one of the best in the league for 2023. Nick Chubb is still playing as an elite running back. The team is filled with tons of receiving talent in Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman. The offensive line is one of the best in the league, and the defense has the chance to be up there as well, as they've replaced their defensive coordinator and they've added a lot of new pieces to their defense. Given Watson's contract, it will be difficult to extend their younger players, and many of their elite players are slowly creeping into the back end of their prime. So Watson needs to make that gamble, all of the stuff I said before, all the stuff that they gambled, he needs to make it worth it for the Browns right now and live up to this contract. Will he return to his 2020 form, where he had the 5th best DVOA and the 3rd best PFF grade? Or will he flop and subject Browns fans to even more misery? Some other important questions for the Browns include, will Elijah Moore make an impact and be worth the trade? Will Jedrick Wills live up to the 10th overall pick? Can David Njoku remain a consistent top tight end? Is the defensive line truly fixed after all of the new investments, adding Dalvin Tomlinson, Za'Darius Smith, Isaiah McGuire, Siaki Ika, and Ogbo Okoronkwo? Can Denzel Ward return to form after consistently being a top 10 to 30 DB, then having his worst season as a pro in 2022? And can third rounder Martin Emerson retain his high level of play? After being drafted 5th overall in 2020, Tua had a very up and down start to his career. He'd start his first NFL game in Week 8 of his rookie season against the Los Angeles Rams, where his first career pass attempt led to a strip sack by Aaron Donald. He'd remain the starter for a few weeks, but then was benched in Week 11 for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Tua would then again start in Week 13, but would yet again be benched after a few weeks against the Raiders, again in favor of Ryan Fitzpatrick, who came in and made one of the most insane throws I've ever had the pleasure of watching. He'd ultimately finish his rookie year ranked 26th in DVOA after starting 9 games and playing in 10. Tua would then improve in his second year, still under coach Brian Flores, with a DVOA of negative 0.7, placing him at 18th in the league. He started 12 games and managed to win 7 of them while throwing for 16 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. But although he was looking better than his rookie year, his play still wasn't particularly inspiring, and many thought they'd look to move on from Tua if he couldn't put it together in 2022. But after his rough start, Tua had a breakout season in 2022 with an 81.9 PFF passing grade, 19 big-time throws, which is 9 more than his previous career high, the second highest DVOA with a 28.8%, 25 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions, a 105.5 passer rating, and most impressively, tying for 9th in MVP voting with a single MVP vote. As much as I wish I could rave about how well he did, because he really did play well when he was not concussed and when he was on the field, everything was not as good as it seemed. If you turned on the news a single time during the NFL season last year, you'd remember that Tua suffered 3 separate concussions, including 2 within a short period of time, leading to a very scary sight on the football field for all involved. Including college, this would be the 4th concussion that Tua suffered in a 4-year span, alongside other injuries such as multiple rib injuries, back injuries, ankle injuries, and a hip injury that ended his college career. 2022 would be the 2nd straight season in which Tua failed to play in every game, only managing to play in 26 games of a possible 34. In response to concerns over his health, Tua appears to have bulked up over this offseason. Maybe a little bit too much. However, questions still remain. Can he play at a high level consistently enough that the team trusts him to lead them to the Super Bowl? And if he can he stay healthy for long enough to actually keep this team in the Super Bowl picture and earn a new contract? After his 5th-year option was picked up, he has 2023 and 2024 to prove that he can remain reliable as a passer and remain on the field in order to get himself a new payday. Other questions for the Dolphins in 2023 include whether Jalen Phillips can cement himself as an elite pass rusher. I actually did a whole write-up on this because I wanted to talk about him so bad, but I have to cut it for time because this video is massively going over what I expected it to be, but I still really want to talk about it, so I might make a video, and let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing a video about Jalen Phillips, because I think that he's going to break out this season. Will recent disappointing draft picks revive their careers, such as Liam Eichenberg, or anybody from the 2020 draft, such as Noah Igbenogany and Austin Jackson? Can the Dolphins receive bounce-back performances from some of their highly paid veterans, like Emmanuel Ogbah, who was awful last season, Cedric Wilson, and Xavier Howard? The Dolphins actually made two of my favorite free agency signings in Isaiah Wynn and David Long, who I also did a whole write-up on before I realized how long this video was going to be if I did this on every team. Seriously, I started with the Dolphins and I have like 5 pages on all of the things that I just talked about, and now I just broke them into one sentence, so I'm just here to complain about it, and it's not really relevant to you. But if you are interested in hearing more about the Dolphins, I guess I could talk about it in a video. Again, leave a comment. What effect will the Jalen Ramsey injury have? Can Vic Fangio live up to his reputation and turn this defense into a force to be reckoned with? Will the GOAT, Mike fucking White, have a third straight season with a 400-yard, 3-touchdown game in a backup appearance? Will the Bradley Chubb trade be worth a first-round pick? Who is their starting running back? Can Teron Armstead stay healthy? How can they survive without the effects of the Mike Gesicki gritty? And what is Braxton Berrios' role with this team? Will he take over for Cedric Wilson, or is he just a returner? Did you guys know that Aaron Rodgers went to a community college called Butt College? While his college may be ass, Rodgers' play over his career has been anything but. I'm sorry. Rodgers has won damn it. Rodgers has won the NFL MVP 4 times in his career, including 2 times in the last 3 seasons. However, at 39 years old and a media circus following his departure from Green Bay, lots of questions have arisen. Last season, the Jets were arguably a quarterback away from their first playoff berth in over 10 years. Many have claimed that Zach Wilson was the only thing holding them back, and that with a new quarterback, this team is a Super Bowl contender. So the Jets went out this offseason and potentially mortgaged their future for an almost 40-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has still played at a high level despite his age, but appeared to fall off a bit last season depending on who you talk to. Some will argue that his thumb injury hurt his accuracy and that his heart wasn't in it. Others will say that he's washed up and the Jets made a mistake. As with anything, it's probably a little bit in between. The numbers do point to a decline, as Rodgers was first in DVOA in 2021 and 21st in 2022, only being 0.3% better than a league average replacement. However, this is significantly better than Zach Wilson, who was 15.2% worse than the league average replacement. The Jets have a lot of young talent to help Rodgers, including Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, DJ Reed, Breece Hall, Bryce Huff, Michael Carter II, Quinnen Williams, and Quincy Williams. Okay, sorry, I know some of those guys don't qualify, I just love how all the names on this team are super confusing. Anyways, in theory, the idea of bringing in an all-time quarterback to pair with young talent is a great one, and I'm not really sure if anyone has ever tried it before. There's a lot more to say on this topic, but we've heard it all to death at this point. In short, the question is whether the gamble will pay off, or if the Jets will repeat the Brett Favre experiment all over again. Another question that absolutely needs to be addressed for the Jets is their offensive line. They're currently relying on Mekhi Becton, who's played 1 game in the last 2 years, Dwayne Brown, who's almost 40 years old, and Max Mitchell, a second-year player who was picked in the 4th round. They're relying on these 3 guys to man 2 of their offensive tackle spots. This is just not good, obviously, and it could cause a disastrous end to a potentially hopeful season. Other important question for the Jets, though, can Sauce and DJ Reed continue to be dominant? Will Corey Davis and Carl Lawson make an impact and remain on the team after this season? How will Breece Hall look in his return from injury? Can Laken Tomlinson have a bounce-back year? Can Mekhi Becton play well enough to give the team faith in him and earn a new contract? And will being on Hard Knocks affect the team's success at all? Justin Herbert has emerged as one of the bright young stars of the game, and he'll now be paid like it after recently becoming the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. However, he has yet to cement himself as a no-doubt elite quarterback alongside Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Pat Mahomes. He's shown that he has the raw talent and the ability to make some absolutely insane throws, but there's one thing holding him back. He's been far too conservative. In 2021, Herbert had an average depth of target of 7.9 yards, ranking 25th in the NFL. In 2022, this dropped to 6.9, placing him at 39th in the NFL. Why is a quarterback with one of the strongest arms in the NFL and one of the highest adjusted completion rates on medium and deep throws not maximizing his potential? There are 3 theories. The first is that this issue was the work of offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi and his play calling. The second is that Herbert is inherently conservative and doesn't like to take risks. Third, it could be that his wide receivers aren't separating, therefore he has to check it down more often. But why is this such a bad thing? Shouldn't avoiding risk be good? Yes, it is, in moderation. Although it negates risk, it also negates offensive production. In an ideal world, you want a quarterback to balance the risk-reward and to make the right choice every time, pushing the ball down the field when it would get a touchdown or lead to a huge play, and not pushing the ball down the field when it wouldn't. In the real world, the elite quarterbacks are the ones who are able to determine whether the risk is worth it, 2, possess the skill to complete the risky play, and 3, make the right decision most of the time and execute it, because it's impossible to be perfect. Herbert has all the skill in the world, as he's very accurate and has a cannon for an arm. But despite this, he led the NFL in checkdown passes in 2022 and ranked 59th of 91 qualifying quarterbacks in big-time throw rate since 2006. When you pass up big opportunities for safer opportunities, you decrease your team's chances of scoring and increase the likelihood that you won't score on that drive or even get a first down. But what's different in 2023? The Chargers have fired Joe Lombardi and have hired former Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who will try his damnedest to get Herbert to throw down the field. Under Moore, Prescott had an average depth of target of 8.6 in 2022, which was 8th in the league. The team also brought in deep threat wide receiver Quentin Johnston, who is huge and has crazy speed and fluidity for his size. Even if he remains conservative, Herbert will still be a great quarterback, don't get me wrong. But in 2023, he has the ability to maximize the potential of all of his tools to cement himself as a no-doubt elite player. Some of the other questions facing the Chargers in 2023 include, is Brandon Staley on the hot seat? Can they ever live up to the preseason hype that they get every single year? Can Keenan Allen stay healthy after rumors he'd be gone? Will Rashawn Slater be himself after a year out from injury? Will he actually clap? Can Derwin James stay healthy? Can this team in general stay healthy? Can Eric Kendricks provide high-level play as his career winds down? Who's the starting free safety? Can Pipkins hold up at left tackle? And what is going on with J.C. Jackson? After seeing himself fall to the 5th quarterback picked in the 2021 NFL Draft, Michael McCorkle-Jones arguably was the best rookie quarterback during the 2021 season. He was 16th in yards per attempt, 13th in DVOA, 15th in touchdown percentage, 19th in interception percentage, 15th in expected points added per play, and 8th in completion percentage over expected. Jones led the Patriots to the playoffs, finished 2nd in Offensive Rookie of the Year voting behind Jamar Chase, was named to the 2021 All-Rookie team, played in the Pro Bowl, and was ranked as the 85th best player in the NFL Top 100 Players of 2022. It all seemed to be going so well. But then, 2022 happened. Jones took a huge step back. He ranked 20th in yards per attempt, had the 9th worst DVOA, was 32nd in touchdown percentage, 33rd in interception percentage, 26th in EPA per play, and 16th in completion percentage over expected. He failed to get the Patriots to the playoffs, he was benched for a short stint behind Bailey Zappi, got into arguments with coaches, and has had rumors swirling throughout the offseason about trade rumors and a tenuous relationship with the head coach GM Bill Belichick. The big difference between 21 and 22? The offensive coordinator. In 21, the offense was led by longtime offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels, whereas in 22, it was led by defensive coordinator, wait, that can't be right. Oh, it actually is, okay. It was led by defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. Patricia has since been fired and replaced by Houston Texans general manager Bill O'Brien, who most recently was the offensive coordinator for Alabama. Thus, this leaves us with the question, can Billy O.B. get McCorkle back to form, or has Patricia ruined him for good? Some other questions for the Patriots in 2023. Can Juju be a true number 1 wide receiver? What is Mike Gesicki's role? He's a receiving tight end who's terrible at blocking. Will Bill Belichick ever retire? Will Josh Uche have another quality season? Can Cole Strange and Tyquan Thornton recover from slow starts to their career? Why do all the cornerbacks on this team have the last name Jones? Can Ramondre Stevenson take over the full workload? Can Hunter Henry live up to the big contract he received a few years ago? Will the grittying power of both Mac Jones and Mike Gesicki together create a force strong enough to make any opponent resign just upon seeing the bright rays of whiteness radiating onto the field? Lamar Jackson had a lot of off-season drama in 2022. It started early last season when the parties weren't able to reach an extension, leading to Jackson playing the 2022 season without a new contract. Jackson would then get injured at the end of the season and not play in the Ravens playoff game, leading to mixed reactions ranging from, he's faking it for contract leverage, to, well, obviously, if he can't walk, he's not going to play. The offseason led to even more drama, where Lamar and the team seemed to have a very negative feeling towards each other, leading Lamar to ultimately request a trade and for the team to say no. The team would then use the non-exclusive tag on Jackson, essentially risking the proposition that some other team and Lamar agreed to a deal, and they just let him walk in exchange for 2 first-rounders. Although, if you know how the non-exclusive tag works, this wasn't really likely, but I'm setting the scene, so shush. As each day passed without a new contract, it felt less and less likely he'd get back with the... Oh look, he signed a 5-year, $260 million deal with the $135 million fully guaranteed. Oh, cool. So why do I bring this up now if it's over? I'm curious to see how the off-field factors play into this upcoming season. Lamar and the Ravens appear to become disenchanted with each other, and this contract dispute also led to mixed feelings amongst Lamar and some of his teammates. But it's not only off the field, the concerns continue on the field as well. A lot of the contract dispute centered around the fact that Lamar has a long injury history and the argument that he's worth less because you can't trust him to start for a full season. This is a hard argument to counter, as Lamar has played only 12 games in each of the past 2 seasons, meaning he's only played 24 of a possible 36, and he has yet to play an entire season or play more than 15 games in a season. Also, I put no stock in this, but I thought it was hysterical that this website says that Lamar Jackson has a 57% chance of injury in 2023. I've never seen this before, so I just thought it was funny and I threw it in here. Anyways, alongside his injury concerns, there are questions about his ability to succeed outside of Greg Roman's offense. Fans became increasingly irritated with Roman, leading to his firing and the hiring of new offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who's coming off a national championship win as Georgia's offensive coordinator. Monken will obviously still utilize Jackson's elite talent as a runner at the quarterback position, but presumably this offense will require Lamar to win more as a passer than as a runner. He's shown the ability to be an elite passer in the past, but he can still be pretty inconsistent at times, so it remains to be seen whether the new look offense will get the Ravens out of the early rounds of the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. Ultimately, the team added a lot of new talent in the receiving core, with OBJ, Zay Flowers, retaining Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, and a hopefully healthy Rashad Bateman. And they've also brought in a new offensive coordinator, they've given Lamar the new contract, so the only question now is if Lamar will be able to stay healthy and if he'll be able to prove that he's worth the contract on the field. Some other questions for the Ravens in 2023 include whether Ronnie Stanley can return to form and stay healthy, whether they'll move on from Patrick Queen, will OBJ stay healthy and live up to his contract, can we see a breakout from Isaiah Likely, Kyle Hamilton, or David Ojabo, will J.K. Dobbins return to his full self, will Odafe Owe bounce back from kind of a mediocre year, and can Rashad Bateman stay healthy? This is kind of a 2-part question. First, can Kenny Pickett show he's the Steelers quarterback of the future? And second, can Matt Canada improve this offense? Let's start with the latter point first. Canada's offense last season was 26th in points per game, ranked 23rd in red zone offense, was 18th in pass DVOA, had the 6th least yards per play, tied for 7th least net yards per pass attempt, and tied for 5th worst yards per carry. The Steelers ultimately finished 23rd in points per drive, and legitimately every single team who fell behind them fired their play caller. I guess someone has to stop the trend? There are a lot of technical problems with Matt Canada's offense that I won't delve too deeply into here, but on the surface level, the offense has not been great due to a lack of play action, lack of hot routes, a low average depth of target, and a failure to scheme up free yards for the young quarterback. And speaking of, let's talk about Pickett. He had an alright but unspectacular rookie season where he finished 23rd in the league with a DVOA of -7.7% and a PFF grade of 75.5, placing him at 18th. One huge concern for Pickett right now is his struggles against zone coverage. This is highlighted best in a video by Alex Rollins, who goes into the details about Pickett's play, why exactly he struggles against zone coverage, and the Steelers' offense as a whole. I highly recommend you give it a watch, but for the sake of this video, let's just talk about the advanced stats that he includes in his video. Pickett's 6.6 yards per attempt versus zone was 54th in the league. He threw 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions against zone coverage. His completion percentage of 68.2 against zone was 25th in the league, and he had a -0.06 EPA per play against zone, ranking 36th. Alongside his struggles against zone, Pickett has continued his college struggles of breaking out of the pocket far too early for no reason, leaving big plays on the table. So these two issues coincide to create the biggest issues the Steelers will face this season. Can Matt Canada improve his offense as a whole? And can Kenny Pickett improve upon some of the glaring weaknesses in the game and show that he's the future? Some other questions for the Steelers going into 2023 is how big of an impact Allen Robinson will make, how the linebackers will play with the loss of Devin Bush, and whether their offensive line is now fixed with the addition of Broderick Jones. I had issues coming up with questions for the Texans that might be interesting or that I could talk about for longer than 2 seconds, so I went with 2 shorter questions instead of 1 bigger question. The first of which, can Derek Stingley step up after a rough rookie season? One of the big questions of the 2022 draft was who was cornerback 1, Sauce or Stingley? The Houston Texans made their answer clear when they picked Stingley number 3 overall, 1 pick before Sauce Gardner was picked by the New York Jets. It's obviously only been 1 year, so it's impossible to say what the right decision was, but after 1 year, it doesn't look great. In his rookie year, Sauce Gardner was a Pro Bowler, named to an All-Pro team, and named as Defensive Rookie of the Year. On the other hand, Stingley was not only just worse than Sauce, he was one of the worst corners in the league. Stingley's PFF coverage grade of 49.9 placed him at 109 of 120 qualifying cornerbacks, and his total defensive grade of 49.1 placed him at 111 of 118. He allowed a passer rating against him of 84.9, allowed a completion percentage of 67.3, was tied for 99th in lowest forced incompletion percentage, averaged a target on every 6 coverage snaps, and averaged a reception on every 9 coverage snaps. People might think I'm just hating on Stingley because I'm a Jets fan, and that is absolutely not true. These stats do not doom Stingley for eternity or anything, and I'm not trying to make fun of him. He's an incredibly talented player, and cornerback is actually one of the most difficult positions to come in and play really well, which is why Sauce is also really impressive. But there's also reports of Stingley looking great in training camp. He's now surrounded by a new group of playmakers, and a new hope surrounds the team, and an awesome head coach who already garnered a reputation for motivating his players and putting them in a position to succeed. But until we see that happen, it still remains a big question for the Texans. Can Derek Stingley show this year that he's worth the number 3 overall pick? Now the next question for the Texans is, how will the Rooks look? This seems to be the first year that Nick Caserio has put together a real team that actually wants to win. They have a new young head coach looking to prove himself. They went absolutely ham in the draft to get 2 of the top 5 players in CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. With the capital they gave up to get them, these guys have to have a huge rookie season to instill confidence in a fan base that has been lacking it for a long time. Stroud had his questions as we went over in the draft process, and you can see in my biggest draft storylines video, such as whether he can maintain the level of play he showed against Georgia or whether he'll continue to struggle under pressure. Will Anderson is the type of player who, in my opinion, won't necessarily be an elite edge rusher, but will always be in the top end of very good, which is not to say that he won't be worth the pick. I just don't think he'll ever be one of the top 3 edge rushers in the league, but I think that he'll always kind of hover around the top 10 to 15 in any given year. Thus, the biggest question for these guys is whether the new rookies and their rookie head coach can put together a promising enough season to instill some confidence in the fan base. Some other questions for the Texans going into 2023. Will we see John Mechie return, and how big of an impact will he have? Will Dalton Schultz live up to his new deal and become a safety blanket for rookie quarterback CJ Stroud? Can Kenyon Green take a step up after a very rough rookie season in which he ranked 77th out of 77 guards? Can Bobby Trees stay healthy and ball out? Will Nico Collins potentially have a breakout year? How will DeMeco Ryans look in his first year as head coach? And can Jalen Petre step up after a back-and-forth rookie season? I just released a very detailed video about the running back situation in the NFL, and I had talked a lot about Jonathan Taylor in that video. So here, I'm going to be discussing the offensive line, and whether they can rebound after a down year. In 2021, the Colts had the 4th highest paid offensive line in the NFL, and for good reason. The season before, in 2020, the offensive line had the 7th highest PFF pass blocking grade, and the 3rd highest PFF run blocking grade. The offensive line continued to be great in 2021. The Colts quarterback had the 2nd most time to throw in the league. They were tied for 7th in least sacks allowed. They allowed the 6th least hurries, and the Colts run game had the 3rd most yards before contact. This led to a 4-year $49.65 million extension for center Ryan Kelly, a 4-year $70 million extension for Braden Smith, and a 4-year $80 million extension for Quentin Nelson, all signed from 2020 to 2022. Going into 2022, the Colts remained at number 4 overall in offensive line spending, expecting their line to be just as good as it had been. And you know what? It absolutely was not. In 2022, the Colts dropped to 23rd in pass blocking and 13th in run blocking, were tied for 2nd in least amount of pocket time for the quarterback, allowed the 8th most hurries and quarterback hits, allowed the 2nd most sacks, 3rd most pressures, 8th highest pressure percentage, and had the 9th lowest rushing yards before contact. Quentin Nelson also had the lowest PFF grade of his career, which was actually 20th of 77, which just shows how good he is, but left tackle Bernhard Raimann struggled heavily early in the season, and guard Will Fries was just not good throughout the entire season. In 2023, the Colts offensive line will be the 6th highest paid offensive line in the league, and if nothing else changes, they're slated to be the 3rd highest paid in 2024. In order to turn the hopes of the team around, these guys have to take a step up and be worth the money, especially with a rookie quarterback under center still learning the ropes of what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. Therefore, it's integral that the offensive line return to their pre-2022 form, which is still a big question heading into the season. Other questions for the Colts include, who will start, Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew? Can Bernhard Raimann take a step up after ending 2022 on a high note? Can Michael Pittman stay healthy and move into the top tier of receivers? Can Kwity Paye move into the top 25 of edge rushers after hovering around top 50 for the last couple seasons? Can Kenny Moore have a bounce-back season after his worst as a pro? Will Darius/Shaq Leonard ever stay healthy? Can Samson Mabukum have a breakout season with his new team? How will first-year head coach Shane Steichen look in his first year with the team? Will the largest contract for a kicker ever be worth it? And when will they bring back Rodrigo Blankenship? And will Jonathan Taylor still be a Colt after 2023, or will he sit out, or will he get traded? Football Outsiders had the Titans' offensive line ranked as 29th in the league in 2022. They had the 4th highest adjusted sack rate, allowed the 6th most sacks, and had the worst PFF pass block grade in the NFL. The Titans now come into 2023 with former Eagles first-round selection Andre Dillard at left tackle, rookie Peter Skoronski at left guard, center Aaron Brewer, right guard Daniel Brunskill, and second-year right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere. Although Brunskill played slightly above average at right guard, Brewer and Petit-Frere both ranked in the bottom half of their position groups. As to Dillard, he's coming off 3 disappointing seasons, where after being picked in the first round, he was benched in favor of 7th-rounder Jordan Mailata, who admittedly has been amazing for the Eagles, but it shows that even with his draft pedigree of a first-rounder, he couldn't retain the job to a guy who had barely played any football and that the team wasn't highly invested in. Skoronski will definitely beef up the offensive line, but he's a rookie, and there are multiple weak links and active questions as to the skill level of the other players to trust them with protecting a 35-year-old quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, who suffered an ankle injury prematurely ending his season in 2022, or a rookie, Will Levis. Some other questions for the Titans include whether Will Levis will take over for Tannehill, whether Derrick Henry will fall off or be able to stay healthy for the entire year, can Harold Landry return to form after being out with an injury, whether they'll be able to get by with their terrible cornerback group, and how this team will perform with aging veterans such as Tannehill, DeAndre Hopkins, and Derrick Henry. After trading Tyreek Hill before last season, it was highly contested as to whether Pat Mahomes would be the same or whether the Chiefs as a whole would be the same. Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that they turned out pretty alright. The Chiefs made do with a receiving core of Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS, Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Justin Watson, obviously aided by their elite tight end Travis Kelce and receiving threats out of the backfield, such as Jerick McKinnon. Going into 2023, the Chiefs have lost Mecole Hardman and Juju, leaving them with a starting wide receiver group of MVS, Sky Moore, and Kadarius Toney. Definitely a lot of potential there, but MVS is a wide receiver with a specific role, not a number one. Sky Moore had kind of a disappointing rookie campaign, but is still a guy I believe in as a future threat, and I think that he could be a very good number two. And Kadarius Toney is a weapon with the ball in his hands if he can ever stay healthy, but again, I don't really see him as a true number one. So there's the question. Can the Chiefs make this wide receiver core work? They have 3 guys who are each not really number one wide receivers, but can do well with the ball in their hands and have specific roles, so they have a spot on the team. It's just that they don't have any true number one. So who will emerge as the number one receiving threat? Outside of Travis Kelce, obviously. But let's get into another interesting question real quick. In a similar situation, the Chiefs are also facing questions on their offensive line. The interior of the offensive line is absolutely insane, with Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. They recently signed Jawan Taylor to play right tackle, but their current left tackle is slated to be Donovan Smith, who is ranked 66th of 81 overall tackles last season, and is the guy that I remember as ruining every single good play the Buccaneers had last year with a holding penalty. They also have rookie Wanya Morris, they have Darian Kennard, Nick Allegretti, and Lucas Niang, so they have a lot of options to play with, but I'm curious to see how they put the offensive line together and how successful it will be. But in terms of some of the subsidiary questions for the Chiefs, they have a lot of breakout candidates, such as Kadarius Toney, Justin Watson, Sky Moore, and Trent McDuffie. It's an important question as to whether Travis Kelce will start to show his age. Can Clyde Edwards-Helaire maintain his first-round status and move back up into the top of the depth chart? Can George Karlaftis take a step up this season? Is this the year that Chris Jones takes over for Aaron Donald as the best defensive tackle in the league? Why is there both Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes on this team? Can Nick Bolton continue after a really high level of play last year? How much longer will Andy Reid coach? And who is their starting free safety? Faced with an arms race in the AFC West going into 2022, the Raiders had two options. They could ship off all of their players for future assets and build a sustainable future for when the division was less competitive, or they could make aggressive moves to try and compete. The Raiders chose the latter, bringing in 30-year-old Davante Adams from Green Bay, signing 33-year-old Chandler Jones in free agency, and bringing in new head coach Josh McDaniels from the Patriots. Despite these moves, the Raiders' season completely flopped, and they went 6-11. Faced with the same question of whether to compete or to trade all their players for future assets, the Raiders again are choosing to fight. They replaced quarterback Derek Carr with quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, franchise tag breakout running back Josh Jacobs, brought in wide receiver Jacoby Myers as a number 2 to Davante Adams, signed cornerback Marcus Peters, and drafted edge Tyree Wilson. By making these moves, the Raiders have shown that they're yet again trying to install the Patriot way and to win again this year under Josh McDaniels, who is reportedly on the hot seat after a rough start to last season, but could not be fired because the team was too cash poor. Well, Mark Davis better take out a loan this year, because if McDaniels was on the hot seat last year, he definitely will be this year. Highly paid veterans Davante Adams and Chandler Jones will be getting another year older. Josh Jacobs won't be on the franchise tag next year, unless they tag him again, I guess. And they'll yet again be facing a question next season of who their quarterback will be, so it's of extreme importance that Josh McDaniels establish that he is the coach of the future, so they have an identity to build around. If he doesn't start winning this season, his second stint as an NFL head coach may come to an abrupt end. Other questions for the Raiders going into 2023 include, will Jimmy Garoppolo actually stay healthy? Can Chandler Jones prove he was worth the deal? In a similar vein, can the pass rush in general help Max Crosby so he doesn't have to do everything by himself? What is Trey Tucker's role with this team with Hunter Renfrow in the slot? Can Duke Shelley have another high-level season? Can Nate Hobbs return to form? What will happen with Josh Jacobs after this year? And can Jerry Tillery revive his career with the Raiders? Quick side note, while making this video, Joe Burrow was injured. I won't include this as a main question because if he comes back in week 1, it makes the whole discussion pointless. However, it's obviously a huge concern for their season, so I wanted to take note of that fact, that it's still a question as of the date of this recording, as to how long he'll be out, if at all. Joe Burrow is 26 years old, Jamar Chase is 23 years old, and T. Higgins is 24 years old. At these ages and the level of skill these gentlemen play at, the Bengals have one of the brightest young cores in the current NFL landscape. However, it's a continuing question as to whether the Bengals will be able to retain their talent and whether, if they retain that talent, it will negatively impact their team as a whole. At the time of recording, Justin Herbert has signed a 5-year, $262.5 million extension, making him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL with an average of $52.5 million per year. This contract comes with almost $220 million in guaranteed money. Joe Burrow and the Bengals still have not agreed to an extension, and although people believe he may sign a team-friendly deal, it's safe to assume that he'll want to be paid at the top of the market unless it's proven otherwise. And this is for good reason. If Joe Burrow falls outside your top 4 quarterbacks, you're objectively wrong. He's proven that he's a winner and he's the future of this franchise. But the Bengals aren't necessarily in a rush to get an extension done, as they have one more year of control for Joe Burrow via his 5th-year option, which could keep him on the team in 2024. But this same thing cannot be said for wide receiver T. Higgins, who hits free agency after the 2023 season. Higgins showed that he could be a number 1 wide receiver in his own right after stepping in for an injured Jamar Chase last season and consistently scoring high PFF grades with a 78.4 in 2022, which ranked 20th, and an 83.4 in 2021, which ranked 9th. Last season, T. Higgins ranked 10th overall in DR and 6th overall in DVOA, which are both metrics to determine how much better a player is than a league average backup in the same situation. With this 2022 performance, Higgins proved that he's not just the secondary option. But with number 1 wide receiver play comes number 1 wide receiver money, which could be anywhere from $20 to $25 million per year. But now, you have the added problem of Jamar Chase, On top of likely making Burrow the highest paid quarterback in the league and paying T. Higgins top of the market money, Ja'Marr Chase is a top 5 wide receiver in the game right now, which demands even more of a payday than simply wide receiver 1 money. It demands elite tier salary, which for wide receivers is between $26 and $30 million per year. Keeping track? Let's assume Burrow is paid slightly more than Herbert at $53 million per year. Assume that T. Higgins is paid at around $23 million per year, and Chase will likely get over $30 million because although Tyreek Hill is the only wide receiver making $30 million, Chase and Jefferson are looking to reset the market with their deals, so let's assume he'll make an average of about $31 million. That adds up to $107 million, which would just simply be half of the salary cap for the entire team taken up by 3 players. Now, before you start typing angry comments, I 100% recognize that this is not how the salary cap works at all, and that the effects will not be that drastic. But it's an exaggerated demonstration to show how difficult it will be to build the rest of the team. Outside the salary cap issue, you also have the issue of guaranteed money, which under the NFL CBA has to be held out for players in an escrow account, which creates lots of issues for team owners, because most owners are likely not carrying around millions of dollars in liquid cash. Rather, their status as a billionaire is based on the value of assets, companies, investments, etc. that they have. This often becomes a problem for owners who inherit wealth, such as Mark Davis and Bengals owner Mike Brown, because they are often cash poor relative to other owners, and a lot of their actual worth is tied up in the team's value, creating a catch-22, where to be able to create guaranteed contracts to help the team to get the cash to put in the escrow account for the players, you'd have to sell the team, or at least some of your stake in it. This is likely why the Bengals have historically not offered lots of guaranteed money in contracts. This is a very simplified explanation of a very complex problem, and it has a lot more nuances than this, but I've seen the word escrow far too much to care anymore at this point, and I'm pretty satisfied with that explanation. It's also important to note, even if they cannot get the guaranteed money together, they can still sign the players by offering a higher salary in exchange for less guaranteed money. But this brings me to my larger point. If the Bengals let one of these players walk, they break up one of the best young cores of talent in the league. But if they retain all of them, it will also be difficult to field a well-rounded team. We've already seen the effects of anticipating these upcoming contracts when the Bengals let Jesse Bates and Von Bell walk. The Bengals are required to determine what course of action best furthers their Super Bowl chances, keeping these 3 elite talents together or letting one of them walk to maintain a more well-rounded team. We could also see one of the players, it would definitely be T. Higgins, not Joe Burrow or Ja'Marr Chase, be traded mid-season so that they can get some return on value instead of just letting him walk in free agency for nothing. But at the end of the season, we'll see what they choose. For now, it's possible that this is the last season we'll see Burrow, Higgins, and Chase play on the same team. Other questions for the Bengals in 2022 include, is the O-line actually improved? Will Jonah Williams be traded? Can Irv Smith finally have that breakout year? Can the defense perform after losing their 2 starting safeties? Is this Lou Anarumo's last year as defensive coordinator? Will DJ Reed continue to be dominant and break into the public eye? Or will he remain underrated? Is this Joe Mixon's last year with the team? And then of course, how serious is Joe Burrow's injury?
Be careful though, it's spicy.
You ever done anything dangerous?
Yeah, I've literally killed someone.
Jeez. That is dangerous. I've done something like that too.
Psych! I was lying. You're under arrest.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Let Russ cook. This was a common phrase in 2020. As a Seattle Seahawk, Russell Wilson was considered an easy future Hall of Famer after an early Super Bowl victory and 9 Pro Bowl appearances. But fans were becoming disenchanted with Pete Carroll's incessant running of the football, so they pleaded, let Russ cook. Russ started off crazy hot in 2020 under this new movement, throwing for a record 16 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, a 75% completion rating, 320 yards per game, a 136.7 passer rating, and 4 straight wins. Fearing that Pete Carroll would go back to his old ways, fans would cheer, let Russ cook, as a rallying cry, urging Carroll to continue to allow Russ to pass the ball 35 to 38 times per game, as he'd done in the beginning of the 2020 season, instead of only 29.5 times per game, as he'd done in Russ's first 8 seasons in the league, which in 2020 would be the 3rd lowest amount of pass attempts per game. As Russ cooled off, the team would go back to rushing the ball more, as in the last 4 weeks, Russ would only throw 30.5 attempts per game. finished the season with the 13th best DVOA, a slight regression from 2019, where he finished 7th in DVOA. Fast forward to 2021, where the Let Russ Cook movement was still frustrated by Carroll's hesitancy to unleash Russ. Russ finished 12th in DVOA, which is fantastic, but he only averaged 28.6 attempts in each game, which ranks Seattle as last in the league in terms of pass attempts per game. Russ and the fans were frustrated. Why couldn't he just let Russ cook? Why couldn't he just let him throw the ball? Russ was also frustrated with many other things during his time in Seattle, including the lack of pass protection. The details about whether he requested a trade or whether he forced his way out of Seattle are fuzzy, but suffice it to say, in 2022, Russ was traded to the Broncos. Finally, somewhere he can cook! And they really did let Russ cook. And he cooked up some utter shit. Taking over a team that was arguably a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender, Russ had a negative 15.2 DVOA, placing him as the 28th worst quarterback in the league at 34 qualifiers. PFF has him around the same range, as his 66.2 grade ranked him 29th of 39 qualifiers. Russ suffered a tumultuous year of bad play, being constantly clowned on, and barely throwing more touchdowns than bathrooms in his house. But I don't feel too bad for him, as right before the season he signed a 5-year extension with the Broncos at an average of $49 million per year, with $124 million guaranteed. But I do feel bad for the Broncos, because now they're stuck with him. And after firing their head coach, they've brought in a new head coach, Sean Payton, who looks to revive both Russ's career and the team as a whole. Can Sean Payton turn this team around after a season full of bad publicity and memes? Can Russ return to being a 5-star Michelin chef, or will he just be a sous chef who's allowed to throw the ball once in a while and hand it off, leading to wins, but also not really any accolades for himself? That was a terrible analogy. I'm just asking whether Russ is going to be able to throw the ball, or if he's just going to be used like he was in Seattle, where he basically throws the ball the least amount as possible, but he's efficient enough in those small amount of attempts to have a good passing game, and he's supported mostly by his rushing and his defense, as opposed to winning games on his own. Sean Payton has worked with a short king at quarterback before in Drew Brees. From 2017 to 2021, Peyton's Saints were 18th in pass attempts, 21st, 15th, 25th, and 30th. In that span, he went 58-23 and had 4 playoff appearances. This means that Payton may not let Russ cook, but he can revive Russ back to his old form, where he plays at his best in a limited sample size, and Payton will use a strong defense and running game alongside an efficient pass game to win football games. Some other questions facing the Broncos in 2023. Can Pat Surtain cement himself as an elite corner after one elite season? Can Jerry Jeudy defeat the trade rumors and meet his potential? How will Javonte Williams look in his return from injury? Is Lil Jordan Humphrey really that Lil? Will free agents Mike McGlinchey and Zach Allen be worth their contracts? Can the wide receivers on this team stay healthy? Evidently that answer is no. I wrote that before Tim Patrick just got hurt and they waived KJ Hamler. Can Greg Dulcich have a breakout season? How will the loss of Draymond Jones affect them? Will Ben DiNucci or Kendall Hinton throw any passes? And most importantly, will Vance Joseph continue to have the time of his life?
And here he is, having the time of his life.
And with that, we're done here. If you guys have stuck around to the end of this video, you're a real one, and I really appreciate you. It means a lot to me that you guys would watch the whole thing, and it validates all of the work that I put into this, and it really means a lot to me. I can't put it into words. Anyway, I'd really appreciate if you guys could like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and it only takes a second. Otherwise, I'll have the NFC version out within the next couple weeks. I already have all the voiceovers and the research and everything done. I just need to do the editing, which still takes me quite a while because I'm not really very good at it yet. But I'm learning and I'm trying to get better at making this video thing because I'm really enjoying putting out this content and talking to you guys about football. Anyways, I won't keep this going much longer than it needs to go. I really appreciate you guys for sticking around and for subscribing and liking. That's about it. Later.